What if I told you that women don't fall in love by accident? They're strategically manipulated into it, and it happens every single day. History's greatest seducers, from Casanova to Cleopatra, didn't rely on charm alone. They weaponized psychology, exploited emotional vulnerabilities, and engineered devotion like architects designing a building. Even Machiavelli, the father of ruthless strategy, wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. But what he didn't spell out directly was this brutal truth. Love itself is a form of fear, the fear of loss. By the end of this video, you'll understand the hidden scripts of female desire and how to position yourself as the unforgettable man. Not by changing who you are fundamentally, but by mastering the Machiavellian rules that govern human psychology. Let me tell you a story you'll probably recognize from your own life. Picture this: a man, let's call him James, meets a woman at a party. He's decent looking, stable, kind. He listens to everything she says, remembers her coffee order, texts her good morning every day like clockwork. For months, he's there, reliable, predictable, safe. He does everything the dating advice tells him to do. Then one night, she cancels their date. Something came up, she says. The next week, she's dating someone else, a guy who ignored her texts, showed up late when he did show up, and left her constantly guessing. James is absolutely crushed. Why, he asks, I treated her better than anyone ever has. Here's the brutal truth that no one wants to admit: women don't choose men the way you think they do. They surrender to them. Machiavelli knew this centuries ago. In The Prince, he wrote that power isn't taken by force. It's granted by the psychology of those who submit to it. Modern dating disguises this reality under the myth of equal choice and mutual decision-making. But history tells a completely different story. Consider Catherine the Great, one of history's most powerful women. She didn't rise to the Russian throne by being liked or playing nice. She orchestrated a coup, deposed her own husband, and ruled with calculated ruthlessness that would make modern CEOs blush. Yet in her private life, she was irresistibly drawn to men like Grigory Potemkin, a man who would disappear for months at a time, only to return with grand gestures and emotional whiplash that kept her constantly off balance. Why would one of the most powerful women in history choose emotional chaos over stability? Because boredom is the enemy of attraction. Stability is the death of passion. Machiavelli warned us, the vulgar crowd always is taken by appearances. Women, like all people, are drawn to the illusion of depth, to the man who seems just out of reach, to the one who makes them work for his attention instead of freely giving it away. Think about the last time you saw a woman truly light up around a man. Was it when he complimented her appearance? Or was it when he challenged her, teased her, made her prove herself to him? Studies in attachment theory have revealed that anxious avoidant dynamics, the push-pull hot and cold behavior, create addictive emotional spikes in the brain. The human mind literally confuses uncertainty for value. This isn't manipulation. This is fundamental human nature. Machiavelli's mentor, Cesare Borgia, mastered this principle perfectly. He would reward loyalty with unexpected cruelty and punish defiance with surprising mercy, keeping allies and enemies alike in a constant state of suspense. His power didn't come from being predictable. It came from the unknown, from the fear of what he might do next. Your mistake. You've been playing checkers while she's been playing chess. You've been following rules that don't actually exist in the real game being played. But here's what no one tells you. What no dating coach wants to admit: women know they're being manipulated on some level. And they want it. They crave the emotional intensity that comes from not knowing exactly where they stand. This brings us to our next brutal truth: why the dangerous man always wins, why good intentions consistently backfire, and how to flip the script without becoming a villain in the process. Let me tell you another story, one you've probably lived but never fully understood. A man meets a woman. He's confident, aloof, unpredictable. He doesn't text back immediately. He doesn't explain himself or his actions. When she asks where their relationship stands, he smirks and says, "Why do you need a label to feel secure? She should walk away." Any rational person would walk away. But she doesn't. Instead, she stays up at night wondering, what does he really want? Does he even like me? What is he thinking? And then, almost against her better judgment, she falls in love. Hard. This isn't an accident. This isn't luck. This is engineered through understanding basic human psychology. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that he who deceives will always find someone who will let himself be deceived." But what he didn't say outright is this: women are not exempt from this rule. They are often its greatest victims and, paradoxically, its most willing participants. History's most legendary lovers were not kind men. They were dangerous men. Take Lord Byron, the 19th century poet who left a trail of emotionally ruined women across Europe. He didn't seduce with flowers, promises, or grand romantic gestures. He seduced with neglect. He would write passionate letters and then vanish for weeks. He would show intense affection and then withdraw it without explanation. Women knew he was cruel, knew he was unreliable, and yet they fought for him, wept for him, destroyed their own reputations for him. Why? Because the human mind has a fatal flaw. It mistakes emotional pain for passion. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, the same principle that keeps gamblers addicted to slot machines. When rewards are unpredictable, when you never know when the next hit is coming, the brain becomes obsessed. It's not seeking the reward anymore. It's seeking the uncertainty itself. A man who is sometimes warm, sometimes cold, sometimes attentive, sometimes distant doesn't just occupy a woman's thoughts. He rewires her brain chemistry. He becomes an addiction she can't shake. Machiavelli understood this principle perfectly. His entire philosophy was built on controlled unpredictability. A prince who was always merciful became weak and was eventually overthrown. A prince who was always cruel became hated and was assassinated. But a prince who kept his subjects guessing, who balanced mercy with firmness, kindness with distance, that was a prince who ruled for decades. Think about the last time you saw a woman completely obsessed with a man who treated her poorly. She wasn't stupid. She wasn't brainwashed by some master manipulator. She was chemically addicted to the emotional roller coaster he provided. Modern dating advice tells men to be vulnerable, to communicate their feelings openly, to show consistency and reliability. But this completely ignores the brutal truth about human psychology. Women don't crave safety as much as they crave conquest. They don't want to be comfortable. They want to feel alive. In Renaissance Italy, Lorenzo de' Medici didn't secure his power by being liked by everyone. He did it by making himself indispensable through a careful combination of fear, favor, and calculated unpredictability. He would lavish gifts on allies one day, then exile them the next for minor infractions. His enemies never knew where they stood with him, and because of that uncertainty, they never dared move against him. This is the secret of female desire that no one wants to acknowledge. A woman doesn't want a man she can completely control and predict. She wants a man who controls her emotions while remaining just slightly out of her grasp. The man who texts back immediately every time becomes boring. The man who never texts back becomes irrelevant. But the man who sometimes responds instantly and sometimes takes hours, who's sometimes available and sometimes mysteriously busy, he becomes fascinating. Now let's return to James, our loyal, dependable, utterly forgettable man from earlier. Why did he lose the woman he cared about? Because he played by the rules of a game that doesn't actually exist. Society tells men, be good and you will be loved. Be consistent and you will be chosen. Be available and you will be valued. But history whispers something entirely different. Be powerful and you will be desired. Be unpredictable and you will be unforgettable. Be slightly dangerous and you will be irresistible. Machiavelli warned us, the promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. In other words, adaptation and unpredictability aren't flaws. They're features of successful leadership and, by extension, successful relationships. Women don't fall for men who promise to protect them from all danger. They fall for men who make them feel slightly unprotected, then choose to protect them anyway. The protection only has value if it feels like a choice, not an obligation. But here's the crucial twist that separates the masters from the amateurs. None of this is actually about manipulation in the cruel sense. It's about understanding the deeper psychology of attraction and human nature. This brings us to our final section, where we'll dismantle the biggest illusion of all, the lie that women are irrational or hypocritical in their desires. You'll learn why the dark triad traits of narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy are temporarily seductive, but ultimately unsustainable. And most importantly, you'll discover how to master emotional tension without becoming a monster in the process. There's a man you probably know, maybe it's even you, who learned the hard way that cruelty alone doesn't create lasting loyalty. He read all the books about being aloof and mysterious. He mastered the push and pull dynamic. He learned to be unpredictable. And suddenly, women started chasing him harder than they ever had before. But then something strange and unexpected happened. The moment he gave in to genuine vulnerability, the moment he showed real emotions and let his guard down, they left. Not angrily, not dramatically. They just quietly disappeared from his life. What went wrong? Why did the strategy that initially attracted them ultimately repel them? Machiavelli hinted at the answer when he wrote, "He who believes that new benefits will cause great personages to forget old injuries is deceived." But he missed one crucial detail that modern psychology has revealed. Fear without purpose is just chaos, and chaos unchecked destroys even the strongest emotional bonds. This is the razor's edge that few men ever learn to walk successfully. History is absolutely littered with rulers who understood power but not psychology, who could command through fear but couldn't inspire through respect. Take Caligula, for example. He terrorized Rome with whimsical, cruel, completely unpredictable behavior. He commanded his soldiers to attack the sea, then declared war on Neptune. He humiliated senators by making them run beside his chariot like dogs. For a time, this strategy worked. Fear kept everyone in line. But then one day, his own Praetorian guard stabbed him 30 times in a tunnel beneath his palace. Why? Because fear without respect, unpredictability without purpose, cruelty without wisdom, these things are fundamentally unsustainable. Women operate on exactly the same principle. A man who is only dark, only mysterious, only unpredictable creates intense obsession, but not genuine devotion. He becomes like a drug, exciting and addictive in the short term, but ultimately destructive. And like any drug, he's eventually discarded once the initial high fades and the real damage becomes apparent. Now consider Augustus Caesar, the first true emperor of Rome, and arguably one of history's most successful leaders. He didn't rule through terror alone. Instead, he mastered something far more sophisticated: the illusion of choice and the power of psychological complexity. When a senator plotted against him, Augustus didn't have the man executed publicly as a warning to others. Instead, he invited the conspirator to dinner. He gave him a promotion. He treated him with unexpected kindness and respect. And in doing so, he did something far more powerful than instilling fear. He instilled guilt and confusion. That senator spent the rest of his life wondering, does he know about my betrayal? Is this kindness a test? Am I being played? The psychological torment was far more effective than any physical punishment could have been. This is the secret that modern seduction gurus completely miss. Women don't want a man who is consistently cold and distant. They want a man who could be cold, who has that capacity for emotional withdrawal, but chooses warmth specifically for them. The warmth only has value because the coldness is a real possibility. Think about the last time you saw a woman's eyes truly light up when you teased her. I'm not talking about the empty negging that pickup artists teach. I'm talking about the confident smirk of a man who could walk away at any moment but chooses to stay and engage. That tension between danger and safety, between availability and scarcity, is where real magnetic power lies. Let me tell you about one of history's greatest love stories, Dante and Beatrice. Dante was a poet who saw Beatrice only twice in his entire life. Once as a child, once as a young man. They never kissed, never had a real conversation, never exchanged more than basic pleasantries. Yet she became his muse, his obsession, the central inspiration for his greatest work. The Divine Comedy. Why? Because absence doesn't just make the heart grow fonder, it makes the imagination run completely wild. Machiavelli understood this psychological principle when he wrote, "Men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that he who deceives will always find someone who will let himself be deceived." But here's the deeper truth. He was pointing toward the greatest deception is letting someone believe they've figured you out while always keeping one crucial card hidden. This isn't about manipulation in the cruel sense. It's about maintaining psychological mystery. A man who reveals everything about himself becomes predictable and therefore boring. A man who reveals nothing becomes distant and therefore irrelevant. But the man who reveals just enough to create intrigue while maintaining an air of mystery, he becomes absolutely unforgettable. Here's what no one tells you about female psychology. Women don't actually fall for manipulation tactics. They fall for the man behind those tactics. The intelligence, the self-control, the strategic thinking that the manipulation reveals, the dark triad traits of narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy work in the short term because they create emotional intensity. But intensity without depth is just noise. The real masters throughout history, the Caesars, the Medicis, the Casanovas, weren't just ruthlessly strategic. They were psychologically complex. They could be cruel, then unexpectedly kind, distant, then suddenly intimate, unpredictable, but never completely random. They understood that human emotions are like musical instruments. They need to be played with skill, not just struck with force. This is the fundamental difference between a boy who thinks he's playing games and a man who truly understands them. A boy thinks love is about control, dominating someone through fear or manipulation. A man knows that real attraction is about leverage, creating psychological dynamics where someone chooses to be influenced because the experience is genuinely compelling. The most successful approach isn't about becoming a cold, calculating sociopath. It's about developing genuine self-possession, real confidence, and authentic mystery. When you have these qualities naturally, you don't need to manufacture drama or create artificial scarcity. Your natural behavior creates the psychological tension that drives attraction. A truly powerful man doesn't need to play hard to get because he genuinely is hard to get. He has options, priorities, and a life that doesn't revolve around any single person's approval. He's kind, not out of weakness or people-pleasing, but from a position of strength. He's available not out of desperation, but by choice. Women sense this authenticity immediately. They can tell the difference between a man who's playing a role and a man who has genuinely become the type of person who naturally generates attraction. The first creates temporary infatuation. The second creates lasting fascination. This is why the most magnetic men throughout history weren't just strategists. They were philosophers, artists, leaders with genuine depth and complexity. They understood that true power comes not from manipulating others, but from becoming so compelling as an individual that influence happens naturally. The goal isn't to trick someone into loving you. It's to become the type of man who deserves that love, while maintaining enough psychological complexity to keep it interesting. It's about balancing accessibility with mystery, warmth with strength, predictability with spontaneity. Machiavelli's ultimate lesson wasn't about cruelty or manipulation. It was about understanding human nature so deeply that you can navigate social dynamics with wisdom rather than stumbling through them blindly. When you master these principles, you stop needing to chase anyone. Instead, you become the gravitational center that others naturally orbit around. Not because you've tricked them, but because you've become genuinely magnetic. If this truth hit you like lightning, if you've ever felt the sting of being too available, if you've ever watched attraction transform before your eyes, when what seemed solid became fluid, only to reform as something entirely new. Type "solvet coagula" in the comments below. It's the alchemical principle of dissolution and reconstruction, breaking down old patterns to create something more powerful. The journey from nice guy to genuinely attractive man isn't about becoming cruel. It's about becoming complete.